Red Oak, Iowa is much like most rural railroad towns that dot the country. Nestled in the rolling hills of the southwest corner of the state, the community boasts a 155-year-old history with the railroad. Today, Red Oak is situated on the BNSF Railway's Creston Subdivision between Creston, Iowa and Lincoln, Nebraska. About half of the subdivision is contained within the state of Iowa. Located roughly midway between Creston and Council Bluffs, Red Oak is the largest town in between. Once part of the Chicago to Denver main line of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, more commonly known as the Burlington route, the importance of the line has not been diminished. The Burlington route became part of the Burlington Northern in 1970, and the BN became BNSF in 1996. Today, BNSF relies on the Creston Subdivision as an integral part of its system, the backbone of the BNSF network in the central United States from Chicago to points in Nebraska, Denver, Wyoming, Missouri, and South Dakota. Red Oak also happens to be where I did much of my early rail fanning, long before I had a camera to shoot videos or pictures with. My dad's parents have lived there for over 3 decades, so family trips to Red Oak happened at least once a year. It takes about 2.5 miles of driving on a gravel road to get to their house, a route that conveniently crosses right over the Creston Sub. I spent many hours as a young kid standing on the bridge you see on your screen, hoping that a train would show up. Usually, there would be at least one. Sometimes I'd also get a ride to the restored brick depot in town, or to the neighboring hamlet of Stanton. Living in Pennsylvania for much of my childhood, it was refreshing to see BNSF orange instead of Norfolk Southern black back home. I finally started shooting video of the line in 2020. I now have 5 videos up on my channel of trains through Red Oak, which you can still watch. For this most recent trip in August 2024, I've decided to turn my catches into a narrated feature. So sit back, grab a drink, and relax as we take a look at a day on BNSF's Creston Subdivision. We'll start just after 6 a.m. at the old Burlington Route Depot in town.
FTK 192 East calling, number fear is over.
Amtrak's eastbound California Zephyr is only a few minutes late today. Despite Red Oak being the halfway point between Omaha and Creston, it has not seen passenger service since 1971. Next up is BNSF's daily Hotshot Z train between Chicago and Denver. Other than Amtrak, this is the hottest train on the Creston Subdivision. The BNSF Z-CHI-DEN and its eastbound counterpart, the Z-DEN-CHI, carry expedited freight and parcels for J.B. Hunt, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, and other LTL trucking companies between Chicago and Denver. Most of the Z-CHI-DEN's journey through Iowa is in darkness. It usually passes through Red Oak between 5:30 and 7:30 in the morning. The summer months are usually better to see this train in daylight due to an earlier sunrise. Three days earlier, I paid a visit to the depot during a more appropriate hour. The historic 1902 depot is open to visitors from 10 a.m. to noon on weekdays. It functions as a small museum that not only highlights Red Oak's railroad past, but its contributions to American war history as well. The community suffered a disproportionate amount of combat casualties during the Second World War. United States Army Company M of the 34th Infantry Division and 168th Regiment was primarily composed of soldiers from Red Oak. Ordered into service in 1941, Company M served mainly in North Africa and the Mediterranean. Along with Company F, comprising men from the neighboring town of Villisca, Company M fought in the infamous Battle of Kasserine Pass in February of 1943. In one day, Red Oak received 27 telegrams for soldiers who had been killed or gone missing in action. About 50 men from the town died during the course of the war. In recognition of Red Oak's contributions, the United States Navy commissioned a Victory-class cargo ship built in 1944 as the SS Red Oak Victory. It is now a museum ship in Richmond, California. Today, the depot is humming with activity. A Herzog ballast train sits on the siding by the main line, idling away. It's led by a power car rebuilt from a former Chesapeake and Ohio GP40. Assisting it is a former Union Pacific SD-70M. Because Herzog only really needs the extra horsepower, the cab windows are blanked out, although the control stand remains in place. This ballast train has been hanging out around Red Oak for several weeks, as track and ballast work has been ongoing since a derailment on August 8th. This day, one of the main lines was completely shut down on the double-tracked portion between Red Oak and the nearby town of Stanton to the east. As a result, the only trains caught today were eastbounds. Before arriving at the depot, my dad and I made a pit stop at the K Avenue Bridge outside of town to catch a 4-hour late California Zephyr. The next train was eastbound coal loads by the depot, led by BNSF SD-70 ACE 9040 and AC 4400 CW 5697. The train was stopped at a red signal just outside of town for over half an hour, until the Creston dispatcher allowed them to enter the double-track main. Unit coal trains are the most common type of train on the Creston Subdivision. This has held true since the 1970s, when the Burlington Northern Railroad began hauling coal in earnest from Wyoming's Powder River Basin. Gradually, the green C30-7s and SD40-2s of the BN gave way to SD60s and SD60Ms, SD70 Max, and today's SD70 ACEs, ES44 ACs, and AC 4400 CWs. Heavy eastbounds noticeably slow down as they pass by the depot and dig into the hill that carries them out of town. Southwest Iowa is by no means easy terrain for these coal trains to navigate, with grades that rise, crest, and fall, only for another to be visible on the horizon. Distributed power is thus essential, and most eastbound coal trains will have 1 to 2 locomotives pushing on the rear via remote control from the head end. Today's DPU power is another AC 4400 CW. The plan for the afternoon was to snag BNSF's local from Red Oak to Creston, which usually only runs on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Expecting the local to pull out of the yard in town and head straight to Creston, we were surprised to see this coal train here instead, working hard to maintain speed while climbing the hill out of town. What was initially surprising was how slow this train was moving. Even heavy eastbounds usually don't go this slow under the bridge. However, a look to the east revealed that the maintenance of way crew had put down red flags by the right-of-way. The train was supposed to stop before getting track authority to proceed. Knowing this, we made our move to drive into town to see where exactly the local was, since it would be several minutes before they moved out on the main line. It wasn't long before we saw them, slowly notching up over one of the bridges that keep the tracks elevated through town. Wanting a better look, we continued to another wooden road bridge, there's a lot of those in southwest Iowa, to try and see what they were doing. When we got there, we were hit with another surprise, a second loaded coal train, slowing down to stop behind the first one. The best course of action now was to find a spot where we could potentially see all three trains, one after another. Our hunch was correct. The two SD-70 ACEs were almost to the bridge when we got there, gaining speed as they crested the grade. All the coal trains I caught on this trip were hauling coal in aluminum 5-bay hoppers. Aluminum has replaced steel as the primary material for the construction of new coal-hauling rolling stock, because the slightly larger and lighter aluminum car can be loaded with several more tons of coal, while still matching the weight limit of 286,000 pounds for loaded cars set by the Association of American Railroads. Aluminum cars also make for a lighter train to haul back to the coal mine, which is why most empty coal trains on this line often have 1 to 2 less locomotives on either the front or rear end. All throughout the afternoon, maintenance of way vehicles came by on the closed second main track to work on the current reballasting project. Take a close look in the next shot to see the difference in color between the new ballast on the right and the old ballast on the left. It didn't take long for the headlights of the second coal train to become visible as the engineer notches out of their stop and begins to dig into another hill. I had heard on the radio that the local would be following this coal train to Creston, so we were set for a show. Despite the noticeable decline in coal traffic since the mid-2010s, the Creston Subdivision still is a line held together by coal trains. At least half of the daily trains on this line are filled to the brim with black diamonds or heading back to the mine for another load. Besides coal, Amtrak, and the pair of Z trains, the Creston Subdivision also plays host to several unit grain, sand, and fertilizer trains. A few manifest freights round out the daily train count of about 15 to 25 trains in a 24-hour period, usually more during the harvest season. Slowly but surely, the coal train comes closer. Although it's quiet now, the sound will be deafening in just a few short minutes. Trailing second out on this train is Montana Rail Link SD70 ACE number 4316. Formed in 1987, the MRL assumed the operation of Burlington Northern's former Northern Pacific Main Line from Sandpoint, Idaho to Jones Junction, just east of Billings, Montana. Wanting more control over this useful secondary route that complemented the ex-Great Northern High Line, the Surface Transportation Board approved BNSF's decision to terminate the original 60-year lease on the line set to expire in 2047. The MRL became part of the BNSF system in January of 2024, and since then a handful of their blue locomotives have been scattered across the country, usually on coal trains like this one.
Hey, was that eastbound or the west one? That is correct. Okay, Roger, I'll be walking all. Roger.
It took longer for the local to appear, but the radio kept us updated of their progress. After stopping for a short while at the red flags, they got on their way. 2 to 3 times a week, the Creston local will run out to Red Oak to serve the remaining industries in town, the largest of which are a fertilizer distributor and a farmers cooperative. Today is mainly hauling tank cars and empty ballast hoppers. Occasionally, the local will head south out of town on the aptly named Red Oak Subdivision. This is one of the last remaining former Burlington Route branch lines in the state of Iowa. Once part of a north-south branch line, it went 18 miles north out of Red Oak to Griswold and south 30 miles to Riverton. Various abandonments eventually cut the line back to a 20-mile branch to the town of Shenandoah, Iowa. The BNSF still runs to Shenandoah a couple times a week, mainly to serve the large ethanol plant on the south end of town. There are also still a couple grain elevators on the line. A trip to Shenandoah will also yield 2 well-preserved railroad depots. The former is a Burlington Route brick structure that now houses a restaurant and microbrewery. The other depot is a wooden building that originally served the Wabash Railroad. Wabash originally had a main line to Council Bluffs that cut through the southwest corner of Iowa. Abandoned in the 1980s, the line was converted to a rail trail and the depot was relocated next to the BNSF tracks. Unfortunately for this BN fan, the 2 Jeeps hauling today's local are of Santa Fe heritage. BNSF 2530 is 54 years old, built for the ATSF in 1970 as a GP38 before being rebuilt into a GP39-3. The 2944 is a slightly younger 45-year-old GP39-2 built in 1979. It's hard to believe that both of these locomotives together have just shy of 100 years of combined service. BNSF has taken really good care of these locomotives, right down to their fairly clean paints. The local had one pickup to make in the town of Corning before terminating in Creston, just under 50 miles away.
Go ahead, over. Hey, we're all wrapped up down here at the cutout. We're finished. We're working away eastbound, stopping short of that signal. Copy that. Work on getting time over. We'll all be on 7272. Roger.
Probably the coolest thing I saw on this trip wasn't any moving train at all. Several weeks ago, 4 loaded grain cars derailed in the early morning, sliding down the embankment of the right-of-way right near the stone rail bridge over Bluegrass Road. One of the cars toppled onto a Rail Crew Express crew vehicle, and if it had toppled a few feet further, the crew member inside would have been crushed. Luckily, he escaped with only minor injuries. I visited the derailment site about 2 weeks later, and it looks like not much happened save for all the trees that had to be removed. There are a lot of tie spikes lying around and even a spring buried in the dirt, which is evidence that BNSF has now replaced the tracks where the derailment occurred. This photo from a week or so earlier shows the bent cross ties. The cause of the derailment is still unknown, but some factors could have been the fact that the cars were loaded rather than empty, and weather and time had simply made the ballasting around the track insufficient. One of the hopper cars could have also had a defect that made itself known when the train was traveling over the switch at slow speed. BNSF, along with several local agencies and contractors, eventually relocated all the debris to a large grass field not far from the derailment site. When I visited, 2 of the 4 hopper cars were still there, waiting to be moved the next morning. It's not every day you get up this close to pieces of modern rail equipment, much less ones damaged from a derailment. Some of the damage could be seen really close up, like this air hose ripped apart. These cars were hauling corn, and there was still plenty on the ground. Here's another look at the running boards on this car, twisted and bent in strange ways. Even a slow-speed derailment like this one can still cause noticeable damage. The coolest part of this was the open hopper bays, which most people don't get to see. They were incredibly reverberant and made excellent concert hall acoustics for this musician. I also found out that there are ladders inside the bays, just in case. The end of this car is pretty banged up, but the other side was in pretty good shape, right down to the brake wheel and coupler. Over to one side, there is a pile of wheels and truck side frames. Note how the pin that attaches this one to the freight car has been bent. Take a look at the scratches on this wheel. It isn't every day you can get this close to examine what makes freight cars go. Then there was this pile, full of miscellaneous smaller parts, lots of springs here and parts of the truck frames bent. More intriguing was this pile of batteries sitting a little ways away. I'm not sure if these are parts of the freight car or not, but if anyone has an idea, let me know in the comments. These cars are transported by flatbed truck to Lincoln, Nebraska. There, BNSF will take a look at them and determine if they are worth rebuilding or destined for the scrap heap. To move the cars, 2 big Caterpillar side cranes are positioned at opposite corners of the freight car. They carefully lift it up just high enough so that the flatbed truck can get under it. Then the car is gently lowered onto the flatbed and tied up. These guys are professionals, and according to a Red Oak police officer who stopped by to watch the next morning, were responsible for cleaning up an earlier 38-car derailment on the Union Pacific Main Line in Marshalltown, Iowa. It's truly been a joy to come to Red Oak multiple times over the past few years. Over time, I've understood more and more about how the railroad operates and where to get the best shots. If you liked this video, I highly recommend checking out my other Red Oak videos on this channel. And although this video is my ultimate special feature on Red Oak, you can be sure that I will be back again. I'll leave you with a clip of Amtrak's westbound California Zephyr a couple years ago as it comes by the depot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you down the line.